Hello there. Good morning. I am Dr. Jill Wiener. I am a internal medicine hospitalist turned meditation teacher and tapping practitioner, and also a very um, growing in consciousness anti-racist, which means I am doing everything I can to fight against racist thoughts and ideas and policies using whatever tools that I have. And so I've been doing this series of interviews on really, it started with COVID, how COVID has been magnifying issues that are already there. And I have someone with me here today who's a bit of a departure from my typical interviews that I've been doing. This is Greg Schisla. Greg and I met, I think it was a little over a year ago. It was in March maybe of 2019. And I went on this anti-racism retreat, which I'll talk a little bit more about, I guess, as we go through the interview. But about like 10 white people came together in Highlands, North Carolina for a weekend to learn more about anti-racism and create projects and plan for ways that we could be better allies and partners in the fight against racism. So Greg I'm going to just share it now. I haven't let you talk yet, Greg, and I'm sorry, but before we went on the retreat, we had a Zoom, and I've never told you this, Greg. We had a Zoom call, and I looked at everyone and I judged a lot of people because I was like, who are these people I'm going on this retreat with? And like, you had this super Southern accent, and I was like, oh, he's this Southern guy. Like, who is he going to be? And I ended up going on this retreat, and you're like one of the smartest people I know, and it's super, super well-read, so knowledgeable about anti-racism, so passionate about it. And your story is so compelling, which is why I have you here to be interviewed today. It taught me so much about my tendency to judge other people for who I think they might be, or what I think they might think or believe or whatever, and that somehow thinking I'm better than them for that, which it's not a easy thing to admit. But when we got on the retreat, these people were like the loveliest people I've ever met. And obviously, if you're going on a retreat about racism, you're going to be have your heart in the right place. So anyway, Greg, thank you for being well beyond anything I could have imagined and proving me wrong in my judgment and othering. And please tell my lovely audience a little bit about yourself and what got you into the anti-racism game.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'm not Southern by birth. I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, in a integrated neighborhood, actually a neighborhood that was integrated, and then white flight happened, and it went the other way. It was segregated and mostly black. So I wasn't raised in an all-white environment. I wasn't raised with racist beliefs. At least I wasn't aware that I was. Now looking back, I see that not particularly my core family, but a lot of my extended family, who I no longer talk to, have some serious racism issues. Went to school in Indiana and moved to Atlanta after graduation. So I've been in the South since 1985. Lived in Atlanta for 27 years, and in 2003, we bought some property in the mountains for a little weekend getaway. We ended up building a home here, my wife and I. And so for the last 8 years, I've been in Murphy, North Carolina. Shortly after moving here, I started becoming more aware of these issues and racism and whiteness. And some ways kind of feel stuck where I'm at now, because I'm not in a place where I can really influence a lot. But this is where I am. So most of the time and most of what I do is using social media, mostly to learn, and to learn from people who I don't have access to in my daily life, mostly Black women and men, but mostly Black women. On Twitter is my primary teaching tool. And I use Facebook and Twitter to try and add my voice to try and make a little bit of a difference. So that's what, and it's been a progression through the years. Obviously, I think when I moved to North Carolina, I had the impression moving from Georgia that North Carolina was one of the more progressive Southern states. And then in 2010, it flipped GOP, and and I started seeing some of the same things being done here that were already being done in other states. That got me riled up. My first real involvement was going to Winston-Salem for a Moral Monday March with Reverend William Barber when the voting rights case was put before the federal court there. And that was kind of when I really got more into it. And then obviously 2015, the election in 2016 happened. And that really ramped things up. And then, my wife got ill, was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and passed away. And so at that point, her biggest regret was working so hard and saving all this money and never getting to enjoy it. And I decided that wasn't going to happen to me. So I retired early. And since then, I've had a lot of time and I've spent a lot of it reading, studying, and just trying to better understand the madness that is whiteness, and to try and figure out what I might be able to do to help dismantle it. So
awesome. And it's such a powerful story. I didn't realize that you weren't from North Carolina. I thought that you had grown up there. So I'm glad that we're having this chance to talk even more, because Greg and I haven't seen each other since March of 2019. So what does anti-racism mean to you? And I'm not looking for a definition necessarily, a scholarly definition, but what does it mean for you in your life?
Well, I'm not fighting racism. I feel like my view of it is I'm fighting whiteness, right? Because whiteness is more, it's racism is a primary tool, but it's much more than that. And what really struck me in my reading and when I first got started, Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility white papers, what really opened my eyes and got me more curious. But one of the first books I read was Birth of a White Nation, their creation, and the subtitle is The Creation of White People and Its Relevance Today. Jacqueline Badalora is the author, but she documents and goes back into history in our colonial days and documents the creation of whiteness, because it's a social construct. It's not a real thing. I mean, I remember as a child being taught it was a real thing, Mongoloid, Negroid, Caucasoid, there's 3 types of humans, all that, pseudoscience that was created to try and justify whiteness. But it really opened my eyes to the fact that all of this is just a social construct that was created by people with power and money, to keep masses from joining together to fight for their rights. And the poison of whiteness doesn't just affect Black people. Yes, it oppresses them, but it oppresses ourselves, and it holds us all back. So I use the word whiteness because, first of all, we don't, like, white people in general can see themselves as part of a group, and we've got to get over that. We can't address the problem until we address what that problem is. And so, what really struck me was, wow, we just created this out of thin air to divide people and control people. And here we are 400 years later, and it is literally being used for the same way.
Yeah.
I live in a very rural area. It's very poor here. Economically, the people that live here have more in common with the poor Blacks down in Atlanta than they do with the rich people. But they align themselves with the rich people because of this social construct called whiteness, when they actually have nothing in common. But they cling to that, and that idea that they're somehow better because of that keeps us all from working together and creating a better world. So my goal is to deconstruct the idea of whiteness that we created, and as a result of that, obviously the tools of it that are being used also go away.
Yeah.
So
that's the best answer. I'm so glad I asked you that question. Because it's not like we hate white people. I mean, I just, but for people to understand that there is a difference between Black Lives Matter and all lives matter. It doesn't mean we want non-Black people to die. It just means that society treats people differently in a different way. And by society, I mean society run by white people. And it's a very, you recommended a book to me, Dying of Whiteness. I believe that was you that
Right.
recommended that to me. And that was like really, really intense, but also sort of disheartening, because like people aren't going to what do you think we can do? Can you talk about that book a little bit? And um, do you have any ideas on what would make people let go, like with their like dying claws, you know, like clenched upon this idea of whiteness,
Yeah,
dying without
sometimes,
health
yeah,
insurance?
that book is very eye-opening. And basically, this man is a doctor and a statistician, and he had spent time living in Missouri, Kansas, and Tennessee.
Hmm.
So those were his models. And he looked at gun laws in Missouri, the unwillingness to expand healthcare access in Tennessee, and low taxes in Kansas. And he documented in Missouri how Missouri used to have gun laws very similar to Connecticut 10, 20 years ago. And they have consistently loosened their gun laws, um, while Connecticut did not. And so he looked at things like deaths by gunshots, mostly suicides, and suicide rates among mostly white males in Missouri over time, using Connecticut as the baseline because they started from the same place. And then he uses statistics to document how many life days have been lost because of these changes in gun laws in Missouri. He did the same in Tennessee with the unwillingness to expand Medicaid. I mean, he literally interviews a guy that is dying of liver disease.
That stuck with me
And the
too. Yeah.
man literally says, I would rather die than any of my money go to help a Black person. So they are choosing death over community with other humans. It's mind-boggling. And then in Kansas, it was their low tax experiment, and he documented how they went from 9th in the country in education to some 40 something, and then he documents how lower education outcomes result in lower lifespans. And so he uses his medical background and statistics to literally document how these policies, which can only be explained via racism and an unwillingness to share with others, are actually killing white people. And COVID, I mean, every day, look what, oh my gosh. So now, I mean, my only hope, or one of the things I would hope would come out of this, is a lot of people that have been unwilling to see it. You got to work really hard to stay uh, willingly ignorant of this,
Hmm.
with what's going on, right? It's real. It's staring you in the face. A lot of this stuff is pretty subtle, and you really got to look for it. This is in your face. It's almost genocide what we're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an article yesterday in the Washington Post on Avalon. I don't know if you saw it, but
Mm-mm.
they did a story on Avalon reopening, and these people are like it's nothing, and nobody's got a mask on. They're walking around. These two women were like, "This is living. You know, you got to live." I'm like, "Yeah, shopping. That's living." But they were interviewing these two guys, and here's a quote. He says, this man says, when you start seeing where the cases are coming from and the demographics, I'm not worried. That's whiteness. That's white privilege,
Mhm.
wealth privilege. And it's sick. And it just shows a complete lack of concern for anybody other than themselves, even other white people. It's, you know, it's individualism taken to extreme.
Right. Right.
And so, you know, I don't, it's mind-boggling to me, and I do hope that one thing that this pandemic will do will help other people see that, and maybe bring some more people on board.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I think that's a really good point. And like with Ahmed Arbery, like white people getting mad and going for a run and taking a picture of themselves going for a run is cool, you know, but then it's like back to business as usual. And I'm just as guilty of it, you know, like I'm doing a series of interviews and I have like an online course that I've done and whatever, but like I'm still like living my white life the way I want to, you know what I mean? So, but like
Yeah.
to have that outrage about things that are happening and then be like, okay, cool, check off the box, like I've done all the things I need to do to be a good white person, moving on. um there's this whole other like deep level of knowledge and awareness that I think most white people don't have, even though they think they do. I thought I did. I didn't know. I was unaware until it was called out by someone. I didn't want to hear it, and it was really, really painful for me. Um, but that was the beginning for me. So I think, yeah, I think maybe the answer is getting more white people to be aware, and not necessarily the people that are so against, but the moderate slash well-intending liberal white people. We're the ones that need to know, and we're the ones that need to be talking about it more. What was your like aha moment? Do you have like a the moment where you became woke? Like, what was there a moment you can point to, or something that you saw that flipped something in your mind from being like a regular well-intended person?
Well, I think I saw something the other day. Somebody mentioned how white people, well, how we're raised to be race neutral, right? I've been a liberal. You I voted for Reagan when I was 21. By the time Clinton came along, I've been a Democrat ever since. I've considered myself a liberal for 30 years. But I didn't understand race. And I was becoming more aware and learning. But honestly, when I found White Fragility, I just reread it this morning, kind of to refresh my memory. Um, it was like getting punched in the gut. It's hard to read, but I'm like, yeah, that's me. But it really, that really opened my eyes and got me digging deeper. And it made me understand that I didn't know half of what I thought I did, and there was a lot more to learn.
Yeah.
And the one thing that just strikes me is when I try and have these conversations with people, white fragility is incredibly prevalent and strong. I mean, people I love have hung up on me just to avoid having conversations.
Hmm.
And they tell me they don't want to talk about it, and I don't let it go. And I got hung up on by my brother.
Yeah. It's
you
it's
know, and I love it. You say something about white to a white person, and you're the racist. I mean, I literally got called a racist by a white woman. So apparently I'm racist against white people because I acknowledge that we are a group,
right.
and that we do things with whiteness, and we need to acknowledge that, own it, and fix it. And just
Yeah.
even talking about it makes me the racist. I'm playing the race card. And that's classic deflection. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to deal with it. And I get it. I sometimes wish I could put my white glasses back on and not see it.
Right.
Life was a lot easier. I didn't have to write off family members. I have good friends, I had a guy here in Murphy. Me and him were a team, Farmer G and Hillbilly. We hung out for years. I don't talk to the man anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and so I've had to make decisions and lose friends over this. And it's not easy, but I once I saw it, I mean, you can't ignore it.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess you can. I can't.
Right. Yeah. It's you
So I have to deal with that. But I now know things I didn't know, and it changes everything.
what
And not really necessarily for the better. I would like to make it better, but right now it's just it's what I see is not positive.
right. So I guess two questions. The first question is, what made you decide to read White Fragility? Because even the thought, yes, the book was the aha moment, but led you to read that? Can you remember that? Because that I think is important.
Somebody on Twitter pointed me to it.
Okay.
And I believe that was probably part of the conversation where I jumped into a conversation among the two women.
Greg, you're cutting out a little bit. Your volume just got real low. You
Okay,
said,
sorry, is that better?
yeah, that's much better. Yeah.
I jumped into a thread of some women and I did the not all men thing.
Mm.
And that was really an aha moment, right? Because I got called out. And they called me out and they pointed to some things that I needed to research. And I believe it was part of that process that, where I ran into the white fragility white paper. So.
Awesome. I love those women for calling you out. It's so powerful. I got called out too, and it helped me. So, okay. So that was question one, was what made you read that? And then my other question is, because it's very eye-opening and it can be very upsetting to learn about one's own role. And where I was kind of going with the outrage about black men, unarmed black men getting shot. It's like we pretend that it's not us, like that's other types of white people that do that. It's not us. I obviously don't go out and hunt and kill black people or anybody, but it's that sense of those are other types of people that are causing this problem and not me. So it's very uncomfortable to have that realization. And my whole approach to anti-racism for me personally, and what I'm trying to do to help people realize it, is dealing with those uncomfortable emotions. But how do you deal with that discomfort? How do you recommend people continue to search and grow despite that discomfort, or maybe because of that discomfort? And like, how can you convince someone to like take on this knowledge that is very uncomfortable when they could just stay in their unhappy place? It's kind of a random question, and I just.
Well, no, it's not, and that's the challenge, right? I
Yeah.
mean, how do you get people to see what they don't want to see? And I don't, I don't know. I've had a few successes. Most people turn me off, and they run and hide and protect themselves. So how to break through that wall is the big challenge.
Yeah.
The one thing, it's the whole MLK, the silent, moderate, liberal, right? Silence is compliance.
Yeah.
And by not saying something, I mean, you may sit there and see, sit at home and see your TV and see that story about Ahmaud Arbery, and yeah, you feel bad, but then you don't do anything with that. Because digging deeper is not comfortable.
And you sit in judgment of other people for that. You don't, it's not
Yeah.
just not doing anything. It's like actively being like, oh God, those people. So different.
Well, that's one of the things, that we as white people are taught, that racism is an individual thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
As long as you're not a bigot, you're not a part of the problem. And that's not true. If you accept the system the way it is, and you don't fight a unjust system based on whiteness, then yeah, you're supporting whiteness. You're not helping dismantle it. You're comfortable in your privilege, and you won't challenge that.
Mm-hmm.
But that is the challenge. People, it's a very uncomfortable thing. When I have these conversations and somebody is willing to listen, the first thing I tell them is, you're going to be uncomfortable. You need to be comfortable with your discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot to ask of people. But if you can't do that, you can't do the work. You can't be a part of the solution if you won't acknowledge the problem. So I don't have an answer yet.
Yeah.
Because it's so difficult, and each person is different. That wall is higher with some people than others. Some people, are seeking, and they ask me questions. Other people, I kind of got to broach it, and that's harder. If somebody brings it up, I've literally had people, ask me more or delve into it. They join my Facebook group. I've got a little Facebook group. called Can We Talk About Race? You know, and so people have reached out there and asked for things to read and things. So those people are, you know, they're open. It's trying to get the people who aren't really seeking an answer
Mm-hmm.
to get them to listen to the answer.
Right.
And a lot of times, like I said, a lot of times that they'll shut you down, and you know, you can only help those that are willing, right?
Welcome to the story of my life. I'm a meditation teacher, so I get enough of like, stop you know, like you don't want to seem like you're proselytizing to people. And then now with you know, racism stuff, that's like, if anything's more touchy than spirituality with people, is race, I feel like. So yeah, it's very, very tough. Um, I love that you mentioned your talk more about the not all men comment that you said. Like, what do you talk about that in the broader context of how that can be
Right.
problematic?
Well, it's not all white people. I did it. Not all men. It was women complaining about, you know, misogyny, and which is just as prevalent as racism, and it's just a bigger part of whiteness. You know, and that's why I don't talk just about racism. Whiteness implies patriarchy too.
Hmm.
We're a patriarchal society. We were created by rich white men. They were the only, when they wrote the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, the only people that really existed were rich white men. Um, so the whole not all, and a lot of times when you're talking about whiteness, you don't get not all men. It's not all white people, and it's people, well-meaning people, but they see a conversation about something, and their initial reaction is to say that's not me, and it's a very selfish response, and they don't see it as harmful, but it is, because what you're saying is, I'm not going to talk about the issue you're talking about. I'm going to talk about me, and I'm going to absolve myself as being a part of the problem. Therefore, I'm going to absolve myself of needing to be a part of the solution. So it is actually harmful as a white person to say I'm not a bigot as a response to an example of whiteness at work.
Hmm.
You're not addressing the issue. You're making it about you, and you're acting as if it isn't an issue because you're not actively participating. But by actively not participating, you're participating.
Hmm. And by like inserting yourself into this conversation that no one has asked you to insert yourself into,
Yep,
you're essentially like discrediting whatever it is that they're talking about or feeling.
exactly. Yeah,
Well,
yeah, yeah. You're saying what your topic's not. I'm more important than what you're talking about.
hmm. What are
So
so I've heard some specific things about, like, if you're a white person, you want to learn more about racism, here's some ways to go about that on social media. But what's some advice you would offer white people in Black spaces, particularly in social media, how to behave, what to look for, what to do, what to not do, how to learn and grow from it.
listen. Don't insert yourself unless asked. Don't, you know, you're there to learn from the experiences of others, experiences that are different than yours, and if you try and bring your experiences into that, you're distracting from their experience.
Hmm.
So it's really to listen and learn, and don't use your privilege to dominate or try and take over the conversation. I mean, this was a big part of our anti-racism conference. Um, you know, I'm a white man. I talk. I like to talk. I can dominate a conversation like nobody's business. And one of the things I had to learn is sit down and shut up. These people have experiences that you don't have.
Hmm.
And you also need to realize that their experience is just as valid as you. I think whiteness teaches us that other people's, you know, whiteness teaches us that other humans aren't as valuable as us, so therefore their experiences aren't as valuable as us. Everybody's experiences are real.
Hmm.
Um, we're all different humans who experience different things in life, and they were all real. So you know, you really need to open up and listen, and be open particularly to things that might not make sense. But rather than say, hey, that doesn't make sense, sit there and be quiet and then think about why it doesn't make sense. And is that them or is that something in you? Because your viewpoint is also unique, and it gives you a certain view of the world. And you might need to let that go to really understand what they're trying to teach you.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I love that. Because I mean, unless you're like clicking the like button or like, and maybe that's it. You just, because I want to say like, oh, you should say that's so interesting. Tell me more. But it's also not the job of Black people to educate white people about race. Like it's the kind of thing they've been doing and doing and doing and doing and hearing so much ridiculousness from white people. I do my best to try not to be a burden on Black people and people of color. Yeah. And so when you react to something and you're like, absolutely not, that's not me, that's the exact time to turn inward and know that it is about you, like that you have done those things. And it is your job to then go read the book, not to ask someone else to tell you exactly what it's all about. That's so
Use the
helpful.
Google.
I'm sorry?
Use the Google.
Use the Google. Exactly. Exactly. Tell us a little bit about your Facebook group. You have this awesome Facebook group, and you called it a little one, but it's not. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's that's an interesting thing too, because I have 1,200, 1,100 Facebook friends. I think maybe 50 of them join my group.
Yeah.
And I talk about this, and I've actually been talking about it more on my Facebook wall versus my group, because I'm kind of, I created the group and I put something on my wall to invite people in, and then I would take my conversation over to the group. I've been posting back on my wall because I'm like, y'all aren't seeing it over there, but I posted a picture of me and my girlfriend, got 100 likes. Posted something about COVID and whiteness and some things, and like gets like 5 likes and 2 comments. So obviously people are avoiding the discussion, but I've actually been taking it more on my public wall, because trying to reach more people. And it's like, if you don't like it, there's an unfollow button over there, but I'm not going to stop.
I saw that.
But mostly I use it to try and share things that I learn, articles or podcasts or something that I find is worth. It's taught me something. I like to share it there. Encourage other people to read it or watch it or listen and discuss it. So
It's great. I'm a member of it, and I have my own group as well, but they're very similar, but I think you get some pretty good interaction in the group, but it's hard because you're like, I have to use the tools that I have. Like you live in a rural part of North Carolina, and you can't, social media is your outlet. It's your, one of the things we learned on our retreat is use your spheres of influence. Where do you have power? And that's what you use. So it can be tough. Yeah, I'll post something on Instagram and it'll get like 1 like, but then people will tell me after the fact, particularly like people of color, they'll be like, thank you for the work you're doing. They haven't liked it, they haven't clicked, they haven't commented, but they're seeing it. And so I hope, I believe that other people are seeing at least that it exists. And I think it's really brave that you brought onto your regular group, because it's hard. It's like, well, what if people don't like me, or what if people will unfollow, or what if it hurts people's feelings? And I think about that professionally. I'm a meditation teacher. People didn't sign up for my email list to hear about racism. And the first time I posted about it, I was like, I won't post about this anymore. I just wanted to just talk a little bit about this thing that I went through this weekend. And then afterwards, like a few months later, I was like, I want to just apologize for apologizing, because this is who I am, and if these people don't want to learn to meditate from me or don't think that my opinion is valuable anymore, then I have to let that fear go, because that's not what's important. And then when you and I have a choice to put ourselves out there or not, like that's the privilege of being white.
Well,
Um,
and that's part of my privilege too. I'm retired. I don't have a business. I've had people literally, when I do make it down to Atlanta or something, and I go on a group ride and I see some friends I haven't seen in a long. I've had a couple people literally come up and say, "Thank you for speaking out. I can't." They run a bike shop or something.
mhm,
They can't alienate a large group of their customers. It's their livelihood. I don't have those burdens.
yeah,
That's part of what I came to the realization. I'm like, you have this privilege, you have the ability. It's not going to harm you in any way other than maybe in your personal relationships, but I'm not going to lose any money over because I speak out. I'm not going to lose any customers. So I do see myself as pretty much in a very almost unique position to really be able to speak out without
mhm,
any burden other than my personal burden, which, and to me, I see it as my responsibility to try and use my privilege to make some positive change
yeah.
rather than rather than use it to skate through life, which I pretty much did for 55 years. So,
What are some of the best books you would recommend for people who want to learn more about systemic racism, whiteness, privilege, all those things?
um, well, before, other than books, there's a podcast from the Center for Documentary Studies out of Duke University called Seen on Radio.
Okay.
And their second season 2 years ago was called Seeing White. It's 14 episodes, about 10 hours total. And it covers everything. It covers the creation of whiteness in the colonial days and the use and the creation of laws to distinguish between groups of people, walks through the creation of the country, goes through the Civil War, Reconstruction, you know, the, the justice system, everything. And it is absolutely eye-opening and does a really good job of pretty much encompassing everything I've read in all the other books.
Okay.
Um, as far as just, it will really open your eyes and allow you to see that which we are taught not to see. And I would say follow up, particularly for guys, season 3 was called Men,
Oh,
and it addresses misogyny, which is all part of whiteness. And this season, which is still ongoing, I think they're getting ready to drop episode 10, is called "The Land That Has Never Been Yet," which is a line from the Langston Hughes poem, and it takes an honest look at our history of what we call democracy. Um, and it's very eye-opening because I like to say we were taught his story, right? We weren't taught history.
mhm.
We were taught his story, the story of our past, written by the white man with all the money and all the power. Bill Barr actually said it last week.
What
He
did he say?
said, "The winners write history, so we'll see what it says." That's a
Oh,
quote, not quite word for word, but he literally said that just last week. I think somebody asked him about what history will say about what he's doing or what the president's doing. He says, "Well, the winners write history, so we'll see." I
wow.
mean, if that doesn't, I mean, it's like they're saying the quiet part out loud now. They're not even hiding
Yeah.
it. So that's also very eye-opening, and it talks about how freedom and democracy aren't necessarily real, particularly certainly not for a lot of groups of people. But the whole concept of that and how that's been used to kind of control things. I mean, it's a tool of whiteness. Democracy is a tool of whiteness. I mean, that's the one thing I've come down to is everything can be explained. Everything you look at in the world that says this is messed up, it can pretty much be explained by this social construct that some people are better than
Mhm.
others. And it all comes back to that. I mean, like gun laws, right? Second Amendment. Gun rights are white rights. Always has been. Was just reading, I read it, in Jacqueline's book about the birth of a white nation. There were laws that literally, back before 1681, there were no laws distinguishing different groups of people. There were African people, landowners, free African people. There was intermarriage. And it wasn't until Bacon's Rebellion where a bunch of poor indentured white and poor white people and Africans got together to fight against the moneyed interests, that they started passing laws that literally created separation among these groups of humans and elevated one above the other. And so it's just eye-opening stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I just, that scene on radio, all 3 seasons, they're all related.
Yeah.
And so those are just incredible. Other books, Crystal's book that we used for our class, How to Be Less Stupid About Race. I love her way she talks about low racial IQ. Mm-hmm. Right? White people have low racial IQ. We are literally raised to be race neutral, and society allows us to not have to deal with race. So therefore, we suck at talking about it. So we have a low racial IQ. So that's my goal, is try and raise people's racial IQ.
Yeah.
Because you can't fix something that you're unable to see. So if we raise people's ability to see this, they will see it. Hopefully they won't like it and won't revel in it, and instead want to change it. So that's a great book. I just recently read How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. Another great book. So you want to talk about race, Izioma Luo. I read that before Crystal's book. They're very similar. And another thing too is, in reading both of those books, and particularly Crystal, she has a PhD in sociology from Harvard, and she talks about it wasn't until she got out of school and started working with people on the outside that she even understood a lot of what she ends up writing about, mm-hmm. about race. Because the educational system, it doesn't teach you this stuff. It actually actively avoids teaching you this.
Yeah.
So she had a doctorate from Harvard, and admits in her book she was pretty much ignorant when she graduated. And that's eye-opening stuff. Even those affected by it, have to do a lot of work to really understand this stuff.
Yeah, and Ken, How to Be an Anti-Racist, he talks about the concept of dueling consciousness, which you know this because you've read the book, but basically this sense of like I want to get better by being more like white people, versus the sense of like I'm amazing just as I am. And there's that like whole like dueling consciousness within a lot of, I can't say all Black people, I can't speak for any Black person, but from what he was saying, that's very prevalent. And that he himself was super, super racist, because when he first started, his debate thing he did in high school or whatever, talking about how Black people need to just be better. And if they would just behave better and stop doing drugs and stop Black on Black crime, then they'd be better. And looking back for him, realizing that itself is racist, because it's that mentality that Black people should be more like white people in order to be better. And that's a construct.
Well, whiteness equals power, whiteness equals privilege.
Yeah.
I always say whiteness is a hell of a drug. Mm-hmm. It's a powerful lure.
Yeah.
And it's, and the one thing you learn with whiteness in reading these books is the definition of whiteness has changed. It's constantly changing. The Irish didn't used to be white. The Jewish people didn't used to be white. But it seems the more diverse we become, the more that door opens to allow other light-skinned groups to attach themselves to whiteness. Mm-hmm. I read something not too long ago talking about how the majority of like 4th, 5th generation Latinos identify as white now, and they're accepted, because we got to keep the majority somehow. Seriously, right? So that whole construct, but it's a powerful magnet. People aren't stupid. They look around and they see what whiteness provides. Then you end up with Candace Owen and Diamond and Silk. They're using whiteness to get ahead. And, you know, in a lot of ways, you can't really, you know, blame them. Sometimes it's easier to get along than to fight.
Right, right, exactly. And I think it's there's so much to realize of what is taught to be good, even like African American or Black dialects, that those are somehow not as good as our proper English, but we have totally morphed and changed English from its actual original form ourselves. But because white people did it, it's okay. Somehow that makes it. I mean, it's just like,
Or those people with Southern accents.
right, exactly. Yes, I know. And I spent my whole life in the South. I grew up in Atlanta since I was 2 months old, but I was raised by Canadians. So I don't have a strong accent, but yeah. And I love Southern accents. I think they're great. But when I'm gonna like judge someone, I'm gonna probably, like, do you fit the like make America great again profile of whatever for me to judge you and think that I'm a better human being? You know what I mean? Like it's crazy, but like that's what happens and it happens inside everyone's brains, but most people, we're taught so much to pretend like we're not doing that, so that because we know it's wrong, but we're like almost denying that our brains do that. And that's the denying that the racism is the very air that we breathe, and the systemic nature of racism. And so we're like, no, 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 I don't think that. No, 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 no. But like, it's until we recognize that and acknowledge that, I don't think there's any way to move forward, because it's always going to be like, that's what other people think and that's what other people do.
Well, and I fit that demographic, and I've had people, you know, say things to me thinking I think like them.
Yeah.
Right? I'm a Southern white guy. I must think like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then they learn that I don't.
It's funny, like my brain did that even though we were all signed up for this anti-racism retreat. My brain still did that. Like, I just couldn't conceive of a world where someone who wasn't exactly like me would think the way, but like, you shouldn't want to think the way I thought back then. Like I was ignorant, I'm still ignorant. I'm working on it, but it's so funny to me the way our brains work and like compartmentalize so that we're not as bad as other people. Like it's even within whiteness. It's even within that echelon of what, white people being in power. Even within that, there's this tendency to do that. All right. Well, thank you so much for allowing me to pick your brain a little bit, and for sharing all of your knowledge. Greg, one of the things that impresses me about you is, I mean, you recommended Dying of Whiteness to me a year ago, probably. And I think you had not just read it, but you still remember like specifically the three parts and what he studied in each part. You have a very good like ability to grasp knowledge and statistics. So whenever I'm looking for that kind of stuff, you're the person I turn to, because you can remember that stuff very well, and my brain doesn't retain knowledge very well. So you have such a great knowledge, and kind of like you're a reference point, I think, for white people who are looking to learn more. I highly suggest joining Greg's group. Can we talk about race? And do your own searching, but he's a really good reference. So thank you so much for chatting with me today. Any last words you want to share with anyone who's made it this long on the interview?
No, thanks for listening. Thanks for having me. It's good seeing you again. Like I said, I make it down to Atlanta a good bit. So, maybe when we feel safe, we can actually get together and talk in person.
Yeah.
I look forward to that. And like I said, I have a group. It's open, called Can We Talk About Race? It's under my name, Greg Shisla. It's open to anybody. It's mostly people I know, my friends who have chosen to join, but they have invited some other people that I don't know in real life that have joined. The more the merrier. I've actually, like I said, it hasn't been real active lately because I've been posting most of my thoughts on the regular wall. But there's a lot of good threads in there, references to Twitter threads, other articles online, educational things that I've stumbled across, and other people share things that they see too. So mostly it's kind of a conglomeration point for people to share. If they learn something new, share it with the group so other people can share it too. And love to have you, and thanks for listening.
Awesome. And I'll put the link to that Facebook group in the show notes. This is interviews on YouTube. So I'll put the link to that for people who want to go
All right.
check that out. All right, my friends, stay safe and healthy, and I'll be seeing you on the interwebs.
All right.
All
Take
right.
care.